Geez, I meant to do a video the other day while the whole coup thing was still a thing, but I was too busy and I wasn't able to do it. There was a statement put out by that Prigozhin fellow who was uh, executing the coup, was the leader. Now, some background on Prigozhin again. I knew the name sounded familiar. I had heard the name many times. And what I found out after I started talking about this is Prigozhin. Well, first, let me say this. What is Prigozhin? He is an oligarch, a friend of Putin and other people. And he has a mercenary army of about 25,000 troops at his disposal. And plus, he has many contacts, friends in high places in Russia. Also, he's respected in Russia. His fighters and he are respected in Russia. And they're probably respected even more after that little coup attempt. Prigozhin also fought for Russia in Africa, in Ukraine, and other places. So this isn't a new thing for him. And I want to stress this point. Prigozhin is not a good guy. He's basically Putin in another form. So if Prigozhin's coup attempt would have been successful, all the things I was saying that, oh, maybe we'll get these secrets between the orange guy and Putin and these other things that Russia was doing, most likely we wouldn't have gotten any of that information because Prigozhin in America is under indictment for meddling in the 2016 election, cyber crimes, running troll farms, shit like that. So Prigozhin is just another ally of this whole Russian-backed machine in the United States. What I mean by Russian-backed machine is a certain end of the political spectrum that's been taking money from Russia and Russian oligarchs and Putin for a long time. So we probably would have just had, if the coup would have went forward and been successful, we probably just would have had another version of Vladimir Putin. And I just want to make sure that people get me when I say this. I don't look at Prigozhin as some type of hero or good person. He's a terrible person, on the level of Putin even, as far as terrible. But it would have been a good thing for a lot of people if Putin had gone down, however that might have played out. And at the very least, a dictator would have gone down, and maybe the country could have gone in a different direction. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And I was really stunned yesterday when I woke up. Woke up in the afternoon. First thing on my phone I see is a headline from a newspaper that Putin has dropped all the charges against Wagner Group and all the people he called terrorists and called them, labeled them as committing treason against Russia. That was the headline. Putin drops all charges. Prigozhin turns around. In other words, Prigozhin was on his way to Moscow. He was a few hundred miles away, his army. And no one was giving him any resistance whatsoever. None of the Russian army came out to meet him and fight him, his people. So he probably would have made it all the way to Moscow. Not probably, he definitely would have made it all the way to Moscow, and he probably would have taken it over. No, he would have taken it over. Because like I said, Prigozhin has allies in the Russian military. They don't want to fight him. They don't want to fight his mercenaries that are seasoned in warfare. They don't want that fight. In other words, Prigozhin had a lot of the Russian military on his side, the people that were supposed to stop him. So the coup most likely would have succeeded. How do I know the coup most likely would have succeeded? Putin dropped all the charges the next day. That's how I know. It definitely would have succeeded. Vladimir Putin is not a forgiving man. If you speak the slightest negative thing about him in public, you are either killed or put in jail, or one of your family members are killed. Everyone knows this, even his most hardcore supporters that spout his propaganda. They know this. When there are protests in Russia, those protests are beaten down quickly and people are put in jail, if not killed. That's why you don't see many protests in Russia. It's a dictatorship. Now, what I wanted to read to you the other day while the coup was going on, right after Vlad gave his speech and labeled Prigozhin and his men as committing treason and traitors to Russia, Prigozhin put out an audio statement. That's what I wanted to read to you really badly, because it proved a thing I've been saying for years, that Putin and his buddies stole all the money. That's why the military is ineffective in Ukraine. They are not equipped well, they are not being resupplied well, and they are poorly trained. Some have no training. They're just throwing bodies at this thing. Then you have people like Prigozhin and his men who are seasoned warriors. That's a private mercenary group. That's not the Russian military. That's a different entity. But as far as the Russian military, again, they're not being resupplied. They don't have the best equipment. They have old, outdated equipment, if they have any equipment at all. Some people, they're just pulling people out of jail and throwing them on the front lines. My point is, they're just throwing bodies at the situation for the most part. So one more time, how do I know this coup would have been successful? Well, once Vlad labels you a traitor, there's no coming back from that. Once you speak negative about Vlad Putin, if you're a citizen of Russia or one of the nearby countries, or someone in the military of Russia or associated with the military, you go on television or you put out a statement on social media saying anything negative about Vlad, you're dead. That's how it usually plays out. This time, Mr. Dictator, Mr. Strongman, drops all charges, makes a deal with Prigozhin of some sort. No one knows what that is. And Prigozhin turns his convoy around and leaves and ends the coup. Vlad was scared. It's that simple. It's one of the first times I've ever seen that in my life, because Vlad's been around a long time. Everything that played out tells me that coup would have been successful. Vlad thought it was going to be successful. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made a deal, and he just would have sent his soldiers after these 25,000 Wagner fighters. He didn't do that. He backed the fuck down and made a deal. That is huge. I've never seen anything like that by Vlad or by a dictator. When a dictator does something like that, that means he's scared. Anyway, let me read the statement I wanted to read. Also, a Russian troll most likely came to my comment section talking up Putin. I could tell that it's not an American. I could tell that by the way they write. And it was straight Kremlin propaganda this person was spouting. Even a channel as small as mine, I get trolls like this that come to my channel if you put a certain title on your video. The trolls in St. Petersburg or wherever the fuck they are will come. Even a small channel like mine. I did a video about Elon Musk and full self-driving technology months and months and months ago at like 3 a.m. And 2 public relations firm trolls came that video at 3 a.m. People I've never seen before. And we're just trying to defend FSD and other things. And it was obvious they were trolls, and it's because of the title I put on my video. So I'm going to read you the statement by Prigozhin after he was labeled a traitor or committing treason the other day during the coup. Here we go. Prigozhin audio message, 10:19 a.m. No one will surrender to the demands of the president. Regarding the betrayal of the motherland, the president is deeply mistaken. We're patriots of our motherland. We fought and we are fighting. All fighters of PMC Wagner. And no one is going to surrender to the demands of the president, FSB, or anyone else. because we don't want the country to live further in corruption, lies, and bureaucracy. When we fought in Africa, we were told that we needed Africa, and then they dumped it because they stole all the money that was meant to help, that was meant to come for help. We'll read that sentence again. Because they stole all the money that was meant to come for help. Can you pull up the... I'll pull it up. I got to pull up the next screenshot. When we were told we are fighting with Ukraine, we went and fought. But it turned out that the ammo, weapons, all money put towards this were also being stolen. While officials are sitting and saving them for themselves for an incident that happened today when someone is going towards Moscow. Now they are not saying anything. Now they are not saving anything. They are striking us with planes and helicopters at the columns with civilians. And they hit civilians because they're missing. And they hit anywhere they can. Thus we are the patriots. But those resisting us today are those who gathered around scumbags. Now, the main point of this message that I read to you, the reason I read it to you, is because it said basically what I've been saying for years. Putin and his buddies stole all the money. They send these guys out to go fight. These guys are so broke, a lot of them, they're stealing washing machines from Ukrainians. And they don't get resupplied. And they get sent to another country to fight. They get no resupply, no help, and it's just like you're on your own. Once you run out of bullets, that's even if we give you bullets. Fuck it, you're on your own. That's why they're stealing things. They're doing horrible, terrible things. That's not a justification for what Russian soldiers or mercenaries are doing in Ukraine. There is no justification. It's disgusting. And they should all just go home. And they should handle their own country. And what I mean by handle their own country is they should put a leader in place that's not going to have them all living the way they're living now. And they're the ones that have to do it. I hope it happens one day. I doubt it ever will. I think it's going to take a guy like Prigozhin with a mercenary army and a lot of connections to ever have a true coup attempt work. But I want to say something. People might have looked at this and said, oh my God, well, it's a coup one day and the next day it's all over, so it's no big deal. No, it's still a big deal. I think this was a huge mistake by Prigozhin, even though he's a terrible person. And I think he might end up dead soon. Because Vlad is not a forgiving guy, again. He might tell you one day, oh, okay, everything's cool, to get the heat off, the heat being Wagner driving to Moscow and executing him and taking over the country. Once the heat's off, what's to stop Vlad now? Why wouldn't he kill Prigozhin or have him killed? They've already tried to kill Prigozhin. A soldier tried to kill him. They executed him. My point is, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of retribution. And I think Prigozhin made a huge mistake. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Anyway, let's go to the Russian troll that came to my channel. This is their retort to what I said. Putin didn't steal anything. Let's stop there. Yes, he did. He steals everything. Putin and his buddies. Of course, they base that statement on nothing. They're just saying it. I just read you the statement by Prigozhin, right? He knows Putin better than any of us. What did he say? He said we went to fight for him in Africa. Him and his buddies stole all the money. We went to fight for him in Ukraine. Him and his buddies stole all the money. So it would seem that the dumb American, that being me, and Prigozhin are right, and this Russian troll in a basement, probably surrounded by other sweaty guys that smells of borscht and vodka with 100 computers and cell phones, is wrong. Now, the person that came to my channel with this statement, I forgot to give you this. Hello, Louise. Hello, Sasquatch. They're using an avatar. Their name was Ivana. That tells you something right there, that the name they're using, believe me, it's no one named Ivana. They used an avatar of a hoary looking woman in a bikini, with one of those Russian fur hats, you know, the round cylindrical Russian fur hat, and they have a cigarette or a cigar or something. Yeah, it's not a girl that looks, you know, that wears bikinis. It's not the girl in that picture. That's the avatar they're using. I guarantee that's not the person that made these comments. So Putin didn't steal anything. Well, Prigozhin said he's stolen a lot. And let me also say this. Russia is fighting Ukraine, a much smaller country with a much smaller population. If Putin wasn't stealing anything and they had invested in the military and they weren't stealing all the money, the war would have been over in a day. Why? Because Russia has a lot more soldiers and a lot more equipment. That's why. I'm not discounting the resilience and bravery of the Ukrainian fighters. Believe me, they're fighting for their homeland. I'm sure they're giving it all they got. They're fighting for something. The Russians are fighting for nothing. They're just half of them being drafted, being told they have to go fight whether they like it or not. The fact that this war has gone on for like a year tells me all I need to know. If Russia had a military anywhere comparable to the United States, taking on a place the size of Ukraine would have taken like a day. But they don't. All the money was being stolen. No investment in the military. That's why a much smaller country with a much smaller population can draw this fight out. Plus they're being backed by, you know, with money and equipment, Ukraine is, by places like America and other places. So this is further evidence that all the money is being stolen by Putin and his buddies. The fact that this war has gone on this long, there's no way a small country like Ukraine should be able to keep Russia in a war for a year. It just shouldn't be possible. Back to what I've said. Putin and his buddies stole all the money. They didn't invest in the military, and they're not investing in the military now. That's why this fight's going to continue for years unless someone takes out the dictator. So Putin didn't steal anything. Yes, he did. And me and Prigozhin disagree with you. He's never had been like the West. Well, that statement right there tells me that's a foreign person, not from America, probably a Russian troll. He's never had been like the West. Well, the difference between the West and Russia is we don't have a dictator. Our candidates don't get 98% of the vote. Of the vote. That's another thing about Putin. When he has an election in Russia, he gets like 98% of the vote. No candidate gets 98% of the vote from a whole country. That's not reality. That's dictatorship, though. Anyway, let's continue. His history speaks for itself. Yes, his history does speak for itself. He was out of power. All of a sudden, he came back into power, even though Russia had a president at the fucking time. And every time there's an election, Putin gets all the votes. It's magic, right? That's his history. He's also a KGB guy. And everyone knows Putin, whether you're in a Russian troll farm working for him or not. Go out in public and say something negative about him, Mr. Russian troll. See how long your life lasts. So, yeah, his history speaks for itself. He's ruthless. Generals and high-level oligarchs and all kinds, they just fall out of windows magically because they dare criticize him. Let's continue. If anything, in 2014, Obama stole, that's STOLE, LD, stole all the gold from Kiev. No, Obama didn't steal all the gold from Kiev. Had it lifted to JP Morgan Bank in New York. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I guarantee that's a lie. The West is NATO, and they have on clock to try and balkanize Russia and China, but it won't happen. They have a small point here. The American CIA, of course, has been working since 1945 to destabilize Russia and have it break up the way it did. And that succeeded. Russia broke up, and certain sections of Russia wanted to be independent. They didn't want to be part of Russia or the USSR anymore. Once Vlad came back into power, what did he want? He wanted the old USSR back because he's a KGB full believer man. That's his paradise. Bringing that old USSR back. All those satellite countries that are now independent countries, he wants them all back. And he wants ultimate power. He's a classic dictator. So that's why you saw attacks years ago. Russia invading Georgia, Russia invading Ukraine again. That's why these things are happening. So yes, the West did want to see, and NATO possibly wanted to see, Russia break up. No one's denying that. Let's continue. But it won't happen. Well, it kind of has already happened, right? During Reagan, when the wall fell and Russia broke up and blah, blah, blah. So it kind of already happened. We have the enemy to Russia because we're a Vatican and British Crown controlled country. Again, that's pointless, irrelevant, whether any country is Vatican or British Crown controlled. Putin is probably the only decent world leader left out there. Oh, you mean the guy where if a Russian citizen goes on TV and criticizes them, all of a sudden they fall out a window? That's a fine leader? That's a decent world leader? The leader who invades neighboring countries just because he can and kills and rapes and all that. That's an excellent, fine leader, huh? The only decent world leader left out there. I know because of people who lived in Saxony, Germany. This is a NATO move. Ukraine is divided due to Habsburg's history and old Roman Empire. Again, all totally irrelevant. The West has been killing the East. Just research Galicia to get a better perspective. And don't believe everything you hear on the news. People always keep throwing that one at me. Stop watching MSNBC. Stop watching the news. Blah, blah. I haven't watched a newscast. I can't remember the last newscast I've watched. That's not how I do things. I'm also not a troll in a basement. Obviously, that person was. And they brought up everything but the actual situation. And again, if Putin is such a fine leader, and he's so loved and so great, when he has a meeting with his generals or a meeting with anyone, he sits like 100 feet away. You know why he sits 100 feet away? Because he knows everyone hates his fucking guts. And he knows at any minute, just like Julius fucking Caesar, 8 men with knives might come stab him in the back. That's his life. He can't go near anyone. When he has meetings with people, he sits 1,000 miles away. Unless they're women. I think I saw a recent meeting he had with a bunch of women in the past year, 2 years, where he sat in the middle of the women, though. He was brave enough to do that. But if there's a man in the room, he's 100 feet away. You ain't getting near the motherfucker. Putin's like, you ain't doing me like Stauffenberg did Hitler. You ain't doing that to me. It's pathetic. Putin isn't a leader. He's a fucking coward. He's a fucking disgusting coward. He's no better than any other dictator throughout history. He's just cut from the same exact cloth. All he wants is absolute power, and he's a total fucking coward looking over his shoulder every fucking 3 seconds. Because he's despised by most of humanity. And I'm sorry, am I supposed to take a comment seriously by someone who uses an avatar with a woman in a bikini with a cigarette and a Russian fur hat? I can't take that seriously. And the English was atrocious. So that's typical for like a Russian troll. That's what I view this person as. Even a Russian troll in a basement full of borscht and vodka and sweaty other guys being paid a potato a day, they don't even believe the shit they're saying. They hate Vladimir Putin. They don't even believe the shit they spout. Just like that person whose comment I just read you. That person doesn't believe any of that. You gotta say it. They're being paid to say it. Or they're in fear saying it. I mean, how could anyone say with a straight face that Vlad Putin is a good guy or a good leader or whatever? No, he's not. He's a dictator. He gets people to do things for him out of fear and intimidation, not out of love, not out of inspiration for how intelligent and wonderful he is or how good his intentions are. No. Everyone in Russia knows if they go on TV or social media and say something negative about Vlad Putin, they're dead. That's the only thing that's held it together for this long. Fear. Not love, respect, love of country, anything. Nothing like that. Fear. He's, the worst kind of thug. He's the worst kind of mobster. That's all he is. He's no fucking leader. Leaders are people that, out of how responsible they are, out of how brilliant they are, out of how brave they are, people get inspired by them. And they want to follow that person. That's a leader. A leader isn't someone that executes anyone who says, anything bad or negative or critiques them in any way. That's not a leader. That's a dictator. That's a mobster. That's all Vlad is. And again, Prigozhin laid out what I've been telling people for years. That Putin and his buddies steal all the money. And I talked about a movie years ago that I saw. It is the best movie about the American CIA I've ever seen, called The Good Shepherd, with Matt Damon. And what happened was a Russian spy decided to defect to America. He used a certain person's name, claiming he was him. Well, the real spy decided to defect later, after the CIA had already taken in the original spy. They tortured the real spy because they didn't believe he was telling the truth, because the CIA had already put all this money and time into the other guy who claimed he was the Russian spy. In the midst of the torture, the man says, the Russian Empire or the Russian military, it's all rust and paint. It's all an illusion. It's all fake. There's nothing to it. That is the truth. That is the truth. All the way since, the early 80s. Russia never had a military comparable to ours as far as capability. They may have had as many men or whatever enlisted. As far as capability, fighting real battles. Without nuclear weapons, America would destroy Russia in probably, a month. The only equalizer is the nuclear weapons. If you want to compare military to military without the nuclear weapons, they're nothing compared to the American military. It wouldn't even be a fight. Because they got nothing. And the reason they got nothing is because people like Vlad and his oligarch buddies steal everything for themselves. And I'm glad that at least for once, as disgusting a man as Prigozhin is, and he is disgusting, I'm just glad that at least for once in this world, someone made Vlad Putin shit his fucking pants. Because that motherfucker's convoy was headed to Moscow and ain't no one was going to stop him. Because there's no love for Vlad in reality. And Vlad shit his pants and had to make a fucking deal with the person that went on worldwide social media and said straight out, I'm coming to Moscow. And you stole all the money from us when we fought for you. And the reasons for the Ukraine war were a lie. Said that to the entire world. And Vlad made a deal with that guy, labeled him a traitor one day. By the next morning, it's, oh, all charges dropped if you turn around and don't come to Moscow. Dictators don't do shit like that. Once you've crossed them, you're dead. That's how dictators handle things. That's how I know, because I read between the lines. I don't need to watch the news. I follow historical events, and I use certain experts as a guide sometimes. And I read between the lines. And when you read between the lines, I'll give you 2 examples. The Ukraine war has lasted a year. When you read between the lines of that, the only logical explanation, and I've seen videos by Russian soldiers, videos by Wagner guys, videos by all kind of guys fighting for Vlad, saying we're not being resupplied. We're being fucked over here. We're stuck in the middle of Ukraine in the winter. We got nothing. So reading between the lines, when you look at the Ukraine war that has lasted a year, that tells you one thing. Hello, David. What does that tell you? That tells you Ukraine is fighting an army that is not being resupplied, not well equipped, and not well trained. That's why it's lasted a year. And the help they're getting from the outside. But even with outside help, Russia should be doing a lot better if they had equipment, training, and being resupplied. But they're not. So when you read between the lines of that situation, that's what you come out with. That's what I come out with. There's no reason Ukraine should have lasted a year when you look at the size of Russia and all the propaganda over the years about how, devastating the Russian military is. A lot of that propaganda came from the United States as well. That we got to watch out for Russia. They're a threat. They're our number one enemy, blah, 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 blah. No. Again, their military isn't nothing compared to ours. And Ukraine's the proof of it. So that's one situation where when you read between the lines, you come out with an answer that is logical. The other situation, again, you have a convoy going towards Moscow who Vladimir labels as traitors and people committing treason against the motherland. They will be punished. Next morning, all charges dropped. When you read between the lines of that situation, what do you come out with? Vlad shit his pants. And he knew that coup was going to succeed. So he had to make a deal. And if he didn't make a deal, his ass be dead or in exile right now or in prison. So he made whatever deal he had to make to save his own skin. That's what you come out with when you read between the lines. And The final question is, did what happened the other day, this little coup by Prigozhin, at the end of the day, after it's all said and done, does this whole situation make Vlad look stronger or weaker? Weaker by a fucking mile. A dictator like Vlad Putin, who never forgives anyone, all of a sudden drops all charges and tells traitors and people that commit treason, oh, no problem, just turn the convoy around and, go about your business. That doesn't happen. It's one of the most embarrassing things for Vlad I've ever seen in my lifetime. And there's a lot of speculation by people out there. Was this a contrived thing between Prigozhin and Vlad? No. Vlad would never want to look embarrassed like this. Have soldiers that he's paying openly talk about taking him out? No. Never. Never. He would never. A guy like Vlad hates embarrassment like that, hates anyone that dare challenge him or critique him. He can't handle it mentally. So at the end of the day, people may not think this is significant. I think it's totally significant. I think it's huge. I'm amazed it even happened. And I don't think it's over yet. There's a video going around that shows Russian soldiers allegedly killing a Wagner soldier today or yesterday in retribution for the attempted coup. No one knows if that's really a Wagner soldier or not. But if it is, and even if it isn't, I expect this type of retribution type things to go on in the future. And I'm surprised Prigozhin made a deal. Because I'm waiting for them to take him out now. Because Vlad is not a forgiving guy. I don't know how you make a deal with someone like that after you cross them. Everyone knows what happens to people that cross Vlad. This was the one guy, though, Prigozhin, as disgusting as he is, this was the one guy that had a real chance of getting Vlad out of there. And it's a shame it didn't happen. But at the very least, like I said, Vlad has been shown to be a total fucking pussy and coward. And he was a cornered rat with his fucking tail between his legs. And he had to make this deal. Otherwise, he would have been bye-bye. At the very least, at least that happened. At least he got a little taste of what all the people he's terrorized and killed and jailed have tasted. I'm glad he got a little taste of that. That is amazing to me. One more comment and then I'll end this. Let's go back to Vlad is one of the most decent, he's the only decent world leader left. A decent world leader doesn't have to, have his main political opponent put in jail for nothing. Literally nothing. Just going against him. That's not what a leader has to do. One more time. A leader doesn't lead by fear and intimidation and threats. A real leader inspires people. And before I go instead of going into that whole description of what a leader is again, let me talk about Zelensky for a moment. That man impresses me. That's an inspiring man. Why? Because at the very beginning of this war against Russia, the United States offered to evacuate Zelensky. And you know what he said? He said, I don't need a ride, I need ammo. And he's been there with his people this entire fucking time. Even though one of the largest countries on earth invaded his country, he's still there. He's not in an undisclosed location somewhere like Vlad For instance, that's the difference between the two men. Zelensky is truly an inspiring figure. And if you look at Zelensky's tweets and how he handles things and what he says, he is an inspiring human being. And he's got balls the size of fucking Mars. Where was Vlad while that little coup and they were evacuated? They didn't even make it to Moscow. The Wagner Group. Oligarchs were flying to Turkey. Lukashenko flying, his family fleeing like a bitch. Vlad fled like a bitch. That's the difference between Vlad and Lukashenko and Zelensky. Zelensky is a leader, a man worthy of respect, and not a fucking coward like Vlad Putin. And every time I think about that war, or I'll see Zelensky pop up on Twitter or whatever, I just think to myself, this guy is just, you don't see dudes like this anymore. Most world leaders, including US presidents, would have been in a bunker or flown to an undisclosed location. Not him, though. Badass. That's a fucking leader. That's someone that deserves to be in power. That's someone that deserves respect. And by the grace of God, I hope he wins. I hope his country wins. Anyway, have a good evening.